a big box, 2 big boxes, one smaller and one's bigger. They're like almost the same size. So, yeah. Okay. I think we're working on the Mustang, right? Are we working on this thing?
No.
Okay, it's not the Mustang. Madison, say hi, Tutu. Hi, Tutu. Okay, that's what we did already. That won't. Just showed them the creeper. Wherever you go, I'll point the camera. Okay, so that's all the stuff. Brake line. Stainless steel brake line. It's gonna help us stop. So, what we're actually doing, I might make a video tomorrow with him. But, there you go. Watch him.
Wait, take it easy. You pull on the end. Nice.
Hey, how do you wash my hair?
Hey, should we put this one in real quick?
Yeah. Put it in the car.
Alright, you get that side. Alright. This thing fits terrible. You really gotta like jam it in here and it still doesn't look great. And then the only thing that holds down that vinyl is those 2 clips, but there's not enough fabric to even cover all the way up to the windshield, so I don't get that. All right guys, so we got brake line on the new rear. We've got gear oil in it. That's how you make a mess. And we're ready to put this thing up in the back of the car. But first, I wanted to explain to you what we had to do to make the brake line work on the new rear. What we did was we ordered a stock factory brake line kit for a Chevy Nova. As you can see, the bends in the brake line on the 10 bolt versus the 9-inch are extremely different. So what we did to make that work was we used the brake line from the kit, but we bent it to make our own bends in it to make it mold to the 9-inch. Then what we did was we took off the bracket that holds the brake hose off of the 10 bolt and modified that bracket by bending it. Drilling out the hole so it would fit the stud on the 3rd member of the new rear. Then cutting a notch in it so that it would actually fit against the 3rd member without being able to rotate and while also being able to sit flush. Last thing. So basically what I'm trying to tell you here is that a factory stainless steel brake line kit that you would order off of like Summit will work even with the custom rear end. You just got to do some modifying and tweaking to actually make it fit. With the way that I have the line molded now, it's all towards the front of the rear. So from the back of the car, you're probably not going to see any of this brake line. That's what it takes to make the brake line fit on this rear axle. So let's start getting this thing up in the back of the car. Rebecca!
What?
I gotta lift, you gotta push.
Push what?
This jack. I don't know why. I have this piece of wood here. So this has little wheels on it, and the wheels are hitting the plywood. I'm gonna try and lift this, and then you gotta get the jack up onto just the front wheel.
This is fantastic. I'm in like nice clothes. I'm gonna crawl over your dirty floor. God damn it, stupid thing. No, like there you go.
Thank you. Was that really a lot?
Yeah, it was. I'm filthy now. It's disgusting.
All right.
Oh.
That's a motorcycle jack, which works great for 9-inch rear ends. So get yourself one of those if you're doing this by yourself. I actually had those baskets that we took off that are the front leaf spring perches. I brought these to a buddy of mine who powder coated them for me, because this gets bolted to a bunch of other stuff that's now nice and fancy and powder coated, so it just made sense. While we have these off from removing the old springs, it makes sense to take this time to install the competition engineering subframe connectors. So in order to install these, what you have to do is you have to take the back subframe bolt out. Then that subframe connector is going to slide in here. And at the back end here, where that frame perch is supposed to go, the other side of the subframe connector is going to be sandwiched between the floor and the connector, just like that. So let's get one of these guys in. Subframe connectors are in. Those front leaf spring perches are in. The only thing, as far as installation, that I had to do was you gotta show those subframe connectors some love, getting them into that front subframe. I don't know if that's just because mine is old and beat up, might be dented, who knows. Other than that, everything else was pretty straightforward. We're gonna call that a night for tonight. Hopefully by this weekend, this thing's back on the ground. Jeez. Okay guys, so before we actually get to installing the rear suspension back in the car, I wanted to take a minute to explain what's coming out of the car and what's going in the car and why this is going in the car. So what we have coming out of the car, since it's a factory 6-cylinder car, is a conventional GM Monoleaf spring. It's thick in the center, tapers out towards the edges, and has this rubber here so that if the spring breaks at the axle, it is supposed to hold it together so that it doesn't cause failure. What we're replacing it with is a Calvert Racing split Monoleaf spring. So these springs are specifically designed for drag racing and have a much higher spring rate than that of a factory Monoleaf. So the design of this leaf spring setup is to reduce and control body separation in the rear suspension and help plant those rear wheels to the ground. The other thing is that this half design helps to distribute the main spring pressure throughout the entire length of the half, reducing spring breakage. These are also manufactured with grade 8 hardware and heavy-duty spring clamps. On Calvert's website, they also advertise that these have been tested and proven to withstand up to 2,500 horsepower. The other cool thing about this design is that you can change this rear spring half to adjust your ride height, or also if you just need to refresh your spring rate later on. So the reason that we're sticking with a Monoleaf style spring as opposed to a stacked leaf spring is that with stacked leafs, you got stacked variables. With the Monoleaf style spring, this is going to be much easier to tune in a drag race style application. So the other important thing here is not just making sure that you have the spring right, but also making sure that the other rear suspension components are right, because they're all going to tie into one another and making sure that your car actually hooks and launches right at the track. In our car, we're going with the Cal-Trac split Monoleaf, the Calvert Cal-Trac bar, and a QA1 double adjustable rear shock. So let me explain how this is going to work. With the higher spring rate, that's going to help us stick those rear wheels to the ground. But when you launch a car, what happens is the twisting of the rear axle combined with the spring rate is going to cause this leaf spring to try to do this. So to compensate for that, what the Cal-Trac bar is going to do is we're going to be able to adjust and set the preload on this spring. So when we launch the car, instead of allowing this spring to try to move like that, when the axle twists, it's going to push forward on this bar, which is going to push down on this bracket, and not allow that spring to do that twisting, which is when you see a guy do a burnout and he doesn't have any sort of ladder bar or any sort of traction bar set up, you see excessive wheel hop. Now, what this QA1 rear shock is going to allow us to do by adjusting the compression and rebound settings is going to help us to fine-tune and control what the rear end already wants to do when you launch the car at the track. All of these suspension components combined are what is going to make this car work. Alright, so now that you know what we're installing in the car and why we're installing it, let's get to putting it in there and get this rear end wrapped up.
That's the end of this video for this one, guys. Stay tuned for part 3. Make sure you like and subscribe, so bye, guys.